Hi everyone, and welcome to our discussion about your Unit 3 drafts. I had a chance to read everybody's draft to email them to me, and I thought I would use the same structure and walk through the grading highlights so that I can point out some pitfalls and some challenges that I've seen in each section. So the first section is the preface, and the preface needs to have three things. The first is a really good sense of your exploration questions. You can state them overtly, and in fact, the preface is the only place you should be having questions. Why this area of exploration is important to you or why it's worth exploring. And then, most importantly, you need to tell us a very specific expert audience. This should not be a catch all. It should not give a handful of them, trying to cast the net widely, because that's not going to give you a great focus from which to frame this proposal. So pick something very specific, and these would be experts in that specific field. The second grading highlight is an introduction that provides us a context. So lead us in without generalizing. In other words, you can assume that people who are experts in the field know the basics. Alcoholism is bad for you. You don't need to prove that to a bunch of experts. But if you have a specific idea that is being debated in the field, maybe about the treatment of alcoholism, you can start launching into some of that context. Be sure that the introduction also has a very clear and arguable thesis. You don't want to say things like, oh, I'm going to explore this, or you'll see in this paper that I'm going to look at these things. No, I want you to tell us exactly what the thesis or the argument is. Be overt in it. The next piece is the section on the current state of scholarship. This is where a bulk of your research goes. One of the difficulties I saw was you guys creating a succinct and focused summary of the debate within the field and what the experts are saying about it. So usually these are around 2 paragraphs, maybe a paragraph. They should not be 3, 4. You need to sort of work on some summaries there. There should definitely be citations in there. And that should lead us to the argument. So the argument needs to be developed. And I'm a little concerned when I see arguments that are half a paragraph or a paragraph. This is really the meat of the essay. So you want to make sure that you're very clear. You're going to restate the thesis and then highlight the major components of each part of the argument. The next point is the counter argument. And if there's no counter argument, then it's pretty difficult to have an argument. So again, you'll use sources here, and you will bring up 1 or 2 major counter arguments, and then you will discuss them. You will either concede to them, you will dispute them, or you'll mitigate them in some way. So that's the contention section. And then the conclusions has to do with what you plan to do next or what the next steps would be. Many of you are calling for additional research. The next point in the grading highlights is the appropriate audience consideration. And as I mentioned earlier, audience is hugely important here. So you'll want to identify who your experts are specifically, use a formal and sophisticated tone. Okay. The next issue is the clear language and few mechanical errors. And the biggest ones I saw here were wordiness. So if you need to, take a peek at the OWL pages on wordiness and or look at the screencast that I've provided you on wordiness. The last grading highlight has to do with the citation style. Now you want to make sure that you don't just cut and paste from the annotated bibliography. If you had errors on the annotated bibliography citations, you'll want to correct those. At this point in the semester, you should be pretty clear on what goes where, how things are organized, what the spacing looks like, what the title of the page looks like, the hanging indents, all of those things. So make sure that is very specific, specifically followed. Also, you'll want to make sure that you are just including on the citation page, whether it's references or works cited, that you're only citing those works that you are actually using in the proposal. So you don't just want to dump your annotated bibliography there. A few other things. You need a title. It should be a descriptive title. You will want to label your sections, especially if you're having trouble with organization. And then finally, do include the contentions in with the current state of scholarship, because that's all part of the scholarship. You don't have to discuss them or mitigate them at any length until you get to that section, but do let us know what all of the current state includes. Those are the big issues. I will be sending more specific comments along, but I hope it's going well. I have returned your